Hello, I'm going to be doing a short video here on replacing the slow boot Generation 1 Tesla radio motherboard with a fast boot motherboard from Android 4.4 to Android 7.1. Now, unfortunately, my Gen 1 is a 64 gig and this is a 32 gig. So I'm going to be sacrificing 32 gigs in order to get the fast boot, but I think it's worth it. Now here's what you're going to need in order to do this. You're going to need a Phillips head screwdriver. There's only 5 screws that you got to take out total, which is really simple to do. You're going to need a soldering iron to do your soldering. Wick if you're going to be taking the soldering off the old motherboard and soaking it up. You're going to need solder, of course, and soldering iron cleaner. And snips if you're going to take off the antennas. I'm going to be taking off the antennas because I don't want to pull off the old solder and have some left over where I don't get a good connection. So I'm going to use wire strippers to give me a fresh new wire to it, because there's plenty of wire inside that gives you enough to be able to cut off a whole new part of it. So I'm going to be getting into this. I'm going to move my soldering stuff over here for now to get it out of the way, because I don't need it right this second, or my board. The only thing I really need right now is my screwdriver. So I'm going to pull over the radio, and it's actually really easy to do. Here's the top of the radio. Here's the Wi-Fi antenna. This is one of the things that you're going to have to remove. And let's see here. Right here on the sides are screws, just right here, that you got to undo, and it's on both sides. You can see there's actually a label over this screw, so you have to rip the label off. That's the little warranty label. And then you can unscrew these, which I'm going to do right now. Make sure you don't lose the screws, and also don't use a magnetic screwdriver because it's not obviously good for electronics. And I'm going to undo the other side here, and then keep your screws to the side. They are small, it's easy to lose them. And then all you have to do is, there's little clips holding it in place. Just go inside there, pry it out. It'll pop right off. It's fairly easy to pop off. And then you can set your lid to the side to put back on later. Here's the inside. Now here is the board that you're going to be replacing. As you can see, that's my 64 gig, but I want the fast boot. So what I'm going to do is, most people replacing this board, they're just connecting right here, soldering, unsoldering, and pulling the antennas off. These are the 3 points that you're going to be pulling off. Now, I don't know if I can zoom in close enough for you to be able to see this. I'll attempt to. But if you look right here, you can see that there's a solder point here and a solder point here. And that's because you have 2 wires inside of each of these antennas that you will have to be soldering back on. So technically there's 6 solder points, but 3 large solder points. And in order to remove this board, which is actually pretty easy, there's a screw there, and a screw over here. And all you have to do is unscrew these. And once again, don't lose your screws. If you lose your screws, you're going to probably lose it inside of your radio. Just pull them out. Oh yeah, by the way, if you look over here, you'll see this red gook. They put this over the top of the screws to hold them down a little. It's kind of like a little epoxy type of stuff. And it's a pain in the butt to get out, and it's actually on top of the screws. So you're going to have to get like a knife, or just have a really good screwdriver that will get rid of the red stuff as you're undoing it. Alright, so once you undone the screws there, all you have to do is wiggle the board on the side. And it's actually got pins in here. And once you wiggle it enough, you can actually pull it out. It will take a little bit of force to get out, but once you get all the, there it goes. Once you get all the screws, it pops out. All right, now I'm going to go over the antennas here so you can identify which antenna is which. And it actually says on the board, right here it says BT and TAN, A&T, and that's your Bluetooth antenna. So it's this weird looking one that they just shoved out the side. Why they didn't put an antenna in this, I don't know. I guess they didn't need one. And the next one is going to be your Wi-Fi antenna right here, which I'm actually going to unscrew. And then there'll be a little nut here that you'll pull off that will allow you to get to this, to where you can undo this. Now this is only if you want to take the antennas out to make your life easier when you're soldering the board, because if it's out here, it's gonna be easier to put your iron against it, and it'll be easier to get these antennas off. This one I'm gonna leave on because this is the GPS antenna, and it doesn't really come through like this antenna does. There's no way to really get it through. So I'm going to leave that one on as I unsoldered these. But like I said, you don't have to unsolder these. If you do, get your wick, put it on there, soak up the solder, and you can unsolder these. I think it's a little difficult to do it this way, but it's up to you. It's just preference on how you want to do your soldering, or if you want to unsolder it that way. I'm actually going to snip these and cut the wires, strip the wires again so I can have them fresh and clean, and then put new solder on to the new board. And so I'm going to do that and pause the video, because you don't really need to see me doing this part of the stuff, because this is all based off of preference. So I'm just going to cut this antenna right here off. There's one antenna, two antenna, and three antenna. And you just remember where they go, and you can identify it on the old board and the new board, as each say they tell you what it is. If you look close up, it says Bluetooth antenna, this says GPS antenna, and this says Wi-Fi antenna. And the new board actually has the same thing with the fresh new connections right here. And it says Wi-Fi antenna, GPS antenna, and Bluetooth antenna. So I'm going to get my soldering iron ready, and I'm actually going to put a little bit of solder on each one of these points, so when I push down the new antenna connections, it will just easily go right into place. And so I'm going to pause the video while I set that up. Alright, so I got my soldering iron out, and I've been putting just little dabs of solder on the end, like this, on the tip. And I've been adhering it to the pads and covering the pads on the new board, so that when I'm ready to put my new antennas on, it'll be really easy to do. Now, I am not a professional at this, so for me it's also trial and error on getting your pads to have enough solder on them. But just make sure you get enough to when you put your wires down that it will be able to cover it, because if you don't, then it's not going to go. So I've got it all set here. I've got enough solder on each pad, and I should be ready to now get my antennas ready. An example of the Bluetooth antenna of what I've done here. I'm going to zoom in And if you look, if it zooms in, you can see where I've cut off, there you go, where I've cut back and pulled back the braids of the outermost tube. And then at the very end, there's another tube, and it's hard to get this to focus. Let's see if I can get it to focus here. It's not really auto-focusing. Okay, here's an example of the Bluetooth antenna. And I've pulled back the braids on the outermost. So you can see right there, it's got plenty of wire on the outside. It's the little one at the end where you get, and it's really, really thin. And that goes on the second pad. The braids go on the first pad, the larger pad, and then the little one goes on the smaller pad. And then that's how you get these to solder together. Now, of course, you have to get this set up just a right amount to be able to put on the new board. So when it lines up, it will fit just perfect. So I've got it just right to where my braids will go on, and the there it is right there. So I can show you how the braids will go on this pad, and then the other piece will go on the other pad with the other solder. And that's all you need to do to solder this antenna on. And so now I'm going to do it with I'm going to pull back the braids on the other antennas, and then I'm going to solder them on. And then I'll be done, and then I'll continue the video. Okay, here is the Wi-Fi antenna, same deal. Cut the braids back and have the one little piece at the end to solder onto the board. And here's the Wi-Fi. That's just going to hook up the same way. Just going to set the braids on there and solder it all together. Actually looks weird at this angle, so it's a little better at this angle right here, where you just solder those two down, and that's it. Now I'm going to cut the, unfortunately, the hard one, which is still attached to the radio, is the GPS antenna, but it's the same deal. It's just a little thinner. It's not as thick as these ones are, so it's going to be harder to strip back and stuff and be able to do. So I'm actually probably going to pull it out, strip it back, and then put it back in before I solder it back on, just to make my life easy. So I'm going to pause and I'll be back. All right, so before I actually cut the wires back, I just wanted to show you why it's so difficult with the GPS antenna, and the reason why it's so square, so it can't slide through the hole like the Wi-Fi antenna can to be able to pull it out. But because I already cut the wire, I can slide it right out, and then I'm going to cut it back, and then I'm going to slide it back in, put the nut back on, and then I can do the soldering on that piece first to get the board on there. And actually, I will do it last, not first, sorry, because of the other ones I can do right here with my magnifying tool. All right, so the GPS antenna was a lot harder to do because it was a lot smaller. To be able to cut those braids back, it made it a lot difficult, more difficult than the other ones, but it's doable. As you can see, there's all the braids right there that you're going to solder, and then the one soldering point. So now I'm going to get it ready to solder on all these connections. So now I'm going to solder on the Bluetooth antenna first. Gotta make sure everything lines up perfect, which it looks like it does. So now I just gotta heat it up so I can push it on, and I'm gonna put each antenna on, and then I'm gonna put the board back in, and I'll do that step after I solder on the antennas because it's boring watching me solder on antennas. So I'll be back. Alright, I got all the connections soldered. So all I gotta do is pop the board in and put the antennas back where they go, screw it in, and I'm done. So let me do that here in just a second. Alright, now that I'm done soldering, I'm going to put the board in. So it just goes back in the same exact way. Just line the pins up. So it goes back in. I have to move it up a little bit so I can see to line it up. The easiest way to do is just line up the screw holes and then just push down on the board. You have to be fairly strong on this because it's not going to sit in the pins right away, so it doesn't hurt to use something to push down on the board. Just don't push too hard, because if you do, it's going to crack the board. I'm just going to use a little Phillips head screwdriver to push between the pins. There's no power, so I'm not worried about it. And now I've got my board down. It's lined up with my screw holes. So I'm going to put my screws in. Okay. One. Careful these don't fall through. Two. And three. Okay, the board is in place, it's secure. Now I'm going to grab my Wi-Fi antenna. I'm going to bend it a little bit because I want to make sure it actually goes back through the hole here okay. It's a really tight fit in here with the Wi-Fi antenna. Just got to wiggle it till it goes through. There it goes. It's almost in. There we go, all the way. Grab your washer over the top. Kind of holds it in place too. Just push that down all the way. There we go. Get my nut. And screw in the nut all the way. Okay, now I'm going to need 2 pair of pliers for this because you're going to want to hold one side while you tighten the other. So I'm going to grab this to hold the nut on the back side, and this one to tighten the nut on the top side. Once you do that, it should be nice and tight, which it is. So that will actually allow me to screw back on the antenna. I'm going to wait on that one until after I put the top back on. I'm going to put the Bluetooth antenna just like it was through the hole here. I'm not sure why they did that, but actually I'm going to do it a little better. I'm going to try to push it through a little more with the black end so it sticks out the side. As you can see, now it's out the side. That's Bluetooth antenna. So now all my antennas are back in. So now the only thing I got left to do is, there's the old board. I'm actually going to remove the extra solder before I send it back to him. But, oh yeah, by the way, the board here is $99 on phoenixandroidradios.com. And if you send back the return board, it only costs $30 for the board, because they'll give you a $70 refund if you return this. So if you want to save quite a bit of money, just send this back to them. And all I gotta do is get the cover right here, line it up with my holes, should snap right back on. Grab the screws on both sides, screw it in. Okay, and then last piece is the antenna. And there you go. Now you have a Android fastboot. And that's it. Thanks for watching.